Hello, thanks for tuning in. I'm Jim Roger,
Good evening, I'm Nick Wyatt.
and we have an interesting show for you tonight. As you've noticed, Nick is sitting in for Peggy. Peggy has taken the night off, very deservingly so. And we're very fortunate to have Nick with us tonight because our show tonight is dealing with Southwestern mysteries, dealing with ancient archaeological findings around the Southwest here. And Nick here is a treasure hunter in his own right, so he's very qualified to do this show with us, I might add. So thanks for coming, Nick. We
Thank you. It's
appreciate
a pleasure to
having
be here.
you. And by the way, tonight's guest is a real old-time Tucsonan and treasure hunter, explorer, miner. He's done a lot of things in his lifetime. He's a brilliant man. He's got a wonderful background. And so it's appropriate that Nick is here with us to help this level of conversation. And with that, I would like to introduce our guest at the same time to you, Joe Blankenship. Joe, thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate it, and I'm sure our viewers do.
Sound like it was an obituary there.
No. Joe, could you give the audience a brief thumbnail sketch about your life and some of the things you've been involved with before we get into the material here?
I've done things my way, and I've been pretty much my own boss most of my life. I married the right woman. She just let me go.
That's important.
She was very instrumental in raising 5 kids that are here. Most of them are teachers. And they didn't share the adventure with me. But Marilyn went with me a few times, but she was pregnant the first 5 years of our life. And so it's...
So you were busy at home too, right?
Well... But I don't think it was quite that. I think it was, if I could come in the house and hang my coat on a chair and she'd get pregnant. I mean, she was a very fertile lady. I mean, it surprises me now, these young kids that can't spend thousands of dollars to try to keep, and Marilyn, I think, tried everything in the world to keep from getting pregnant, but it still didn't work.
So what happened after that phase in your life?
Well, I think her dad took me down and had me spaded. They made a sport bottle out of me.
Okay. Now, you did a lot of mining excavations and exploring around. Would you get into that a little bit?
Well, I've been interested in mineral almost all of my life, and I was very fortunate when I was quite young. There was a German professor from Germany, and he was not allowed to teach, and he was raising vegetables, and he was using mineral to supplement the vegetables, and so I did a lot of work with him. He had lost an eye in an accident. He was a one-eyed professor, but anyway, everybody picked on him a little bit, but because he was a German, even my father didn't want me around him. Everybody thought that he was going to poison the rest of the people. They were very superstitious sort of people, but he was a very brilliant man, and through him I met many people, Dr. Schumberger, other people from Germany, Dr. Pop, a bunch of people, particularly from Germany, through just an introduction of knowing this man. And these people have come and visited us here. And through that I got interested. Dr. Willard Pye kind of took me under wing and allowed me to audit courses at the university for years.
Wonderful. And
Pye would go with me, and and his wife was a wonderful person too after he passed away. She was... she had a library. I think sometimes she was bright as he was. I mean, but
she was probably the driving force. Huh?
I think so. I mean, I find that really, if anybody gets anything done in the world, it has to be a woman in the background.
Yeah. Well, you know, I have a transcript here. It's on the internet. Anybody can get this and read this. This transcript, Joe, is from the Monday, April 5th, 1909 Phoenix Gazette newspaper. Anybody can look this up on the internet, and the title of the article was, why don't we zoom in on, this is just a transcript. It's Explorations in the Grand Canyon. This was a full-page article, again, in the April 5th, 1909 Phoenix Gazette newspaper. And I'd just like to read a small segment, and actually what we could do is just read a segment, bounce the information around, go to another segment. So by the time we're done with the show, the audience will have heard the entire article without getting bored to death without reading. But just one little segment at a time. And I'll start off. It says, Explorations in the Grand Canyon, mysteries of immense rich cavern being brought to life. Remarkable finds indicate that ancient people migrated from the Orient. The latest news of the progress of the explorations is what is now regarded by scientists as not only the oldest archaeological discovery in the United States, but one of the most valuable in the world, which was mentioned some time ago in the Gazette, was brought to the city yesterday by G.E. Kincaid, the explorer who found the great underground citadel of the Grand Canyon during a trip from Green River, Wyoming, down the Colorado in a wooden boat to Yuma several months ago. According to the story related yesterday in the Gazette by Mr. Kincaid, the archaeologists of the Smithsonian Institute, which were financing the explorations, have made discoveries which almost conclusively prove that the race which inhabited the mysterious cavern, hewn in solid rock by human hands, was of Oriental origin, possibly from Egypt, tracing back to Ramses. If the theories are borne out by the translation of the tablets engraved with the hieroglyphics, the mystery of the prehistoric peoples of North America, their ancient arts, who they were, and whence they came, will be solved. Egypt and the Nile and Arizona and the Colorado will be linked by a historical chain running back to ages which staggers the wildest fancy of the fictionist. And one more segment I'll read before we get into the material here. A thorough investigation is the next subtitle, and that says, under the direction of Professor S.A. Jordan, the Smithsonian Institute is now prosecuting the most thorough explorations which will be continued until the last link in the chain is forged. Nearly a 9-mile underground, almost 1,480 feet below the surface, the long main passage has been delved into to find another mammoth chamber from which radiates scores of passageways like the spokes of a wheel. Several hundred rooms have been discovered, reached by passageways running from the main passage, one of them having explored for 854 feet and another for 634 feet. The recent finds include articles which have never been known as native to this country, and doubtless they have their own origin in the Orient. War weapons, copper instruments, sharp-edged and hard steel, indicate the high state of civilization reached by these strange people. So interested have the scientists become that their preparations are being made to equip the camp for extensive studies, and the force will be increased to 30 or 40 persons. Before going further into the cavern, better facilities for lighting have to be installed, for the darkness is dense and quite impenetrable for the average flashlight. In order to avoid being lost, wires are being strung from the entrance to all passageways leading directly down to the chambers. How far this cavern extends, no one can guess, but it is now the belief of many that what has already been explored is merely the barracks, to use an American term, for the soldiers, and that far into the underworld will be found the main communal dwellings of the families. The perfect ventilation of the cavern, the steady draft that blows through, indicates that it has another outlet to the surface.
Oh. I think it might be the same place that we discovered by accident, but we didn't go through an opening that was that. I was really looking for uranium. Glenn Allen, me, and there was a fellow here, Mr. Kinsley.
Mm-hmm.
They were very interested in uranium. Uranium was paying a premium at that time to look for it. And I got my first Geiger counter, then we got a scintillator, and we started looking. And Charlie Steen and Vernon Picks, both of these did find huge deposits of uranium later and became very wealthy. They were people that was interested in the canyon too.
Okay. And when was this, Joe?
We started up there at the early 50s. And we were looking for uranium. And we found some traces of mineral and some hot spots. There was enough uranium that was taken down that I think Kinsley got $10,000 for the prize for taking enough of it. But we didn't, the uranium was kind of planted or salted in Moser's Ranch down near Kinsley's property. But the government did pay the finder's fee for finding uranium. But the uranium up there was carnotite, and the stuff down at Moser's was pitchblende. So anybody, but anyway, it was actually it was a few shysters got involved in it too. And while I was there, I noticed that there was a lot of bats coming out of one place. And we went into this place and found just an unbelievable amount of guano. And it was really a lot of it. And we're trying to figure out how to get it out of the canyon. And we finally did figure out how to get it out of the canyon, which resulted in a big disaster. But we shot a line across. This is a very narrow part of the canyon. And we shot a line across with a gun and some black powder. And then we drug a rope. And then after that, we drug a cable. And I mean, this was quite a deal to go, because you had to go for miles back around all the way to a passage point and come back in. We were talking about 3-4 days just to do each phase of this. But we did get into the guano, and we had a lot of problems with it. Back in those days, the guano was, nurseries would buy it, and it was really valuable. We had a product liability problem, as the fact that the guano would eat its way out of cans. And we had wax paper we tried, but the better plastics wasn't around at that time.
Yeah,
but we had some problems on that. But we finally got a cable across the canyon and got a small little loader down in the bottom and could load the stuff out. Now, I had a little problem for mining coal when I was younger, and I had some black damp. I just couldn't take the acid on this. But I wanted to be part of it, and I wanted to know how much was going out. Okay. And we were constantly fighting among ourselves on what little checks did come in.
We have the cable crossing on the screen here. This is a 1919 map I discovered on the internet. I'm circling it with the cursor here. On the newer maps, you can't find these locations. They all have Egyptian names.
There was, last year, there was a tile setter in Phoenix that I've known for a number of years, and Brian went up and he found the cable on the side of the wall, took pictures of it before they run him out. And he was going down the canyon with a group of other people, but they're pretty fussy about that now. But back in the early 50s, there was practically nobody there. The Bureau of Land Management had a small office with 2 people. The Bureau of Mines had a small office with 2 people. Now they stumble over themselves and you can't get nothing done. There's high, huge towers in Phoenix with hundreds of people working in them, and nobody gets anything done.
They must have got their training in Washington.
Well, I think that's where it happened.
If we could go to this map, bring that back up for a second on the screen. I want to show the audience some of these locations with the pointer. Here you have a Shiva temple. I'm circling it.
Yeah, notice that all of these have Egyptian names.
Yeah, Osiris temple, Horus temple, Tower of Set. I think that's a misprint. I think they mean Seti. Isis temple, Cheops pyramid, and if we go to if we pull that screen off, I'll go to another map. There's another map that is to the west of this location. If we come back up again with it, there's a final one called the Tower of Ra, west of Osiris temple here, Tower of Ra. So all these places have Egyptian names, and I had to go on the internet and dig into a 1919 map to get these Egyptian names back up again. And in most of the newer maps today, you don't see that anymore. I'm sorry, Joe, but go ahead.
When we first found these, I was trying to get away from the acid of breathing. I had a little trouble breathing. We had a 12-man rubber raft, one of the things that we'd gotten from surplus from the Navy. And we had 2 little motors on it, and I could go around looking at these things. And one time I looked out, and there was a rain that had hit the wall, and there was lines that was going parallel and vertical. And you wouldn't see them otherwise, but the water had seeped in those cracks. And it was up quite a ways. It took me several days to get around, work over, and get a rope over the thing and build a Bozeman deal to get up there. And we didn't, around the bat guano, we didn't use powder. So we had to bring, Glenn and I brought some dynamite up, and we blew a hole in it. And we got in it, and that was a large room that led into many other rooms. And there was a lot of artifacts in there, and there was some bodies that were very large. And it was the surprising part when the moisture gets in any places where there's human
remains. Mummified.
Particular the feces.
Yeah.
It's still alive. It'll start stinking if any moisture gets around it. So
after thousands of years.
After thousands of years, no question about it. But some of the things, I never saw this article before. Carl Hayden one time did get me a newspaper article that was in a Phoenix paper, but it was just a photocopy, and it was one of the old photocopies, the ammonia type.
Yeah.
And it faded out real bad. It was very difficult to read, and it was something. Now, I do know a lot of the people that was involved in this, some of the people I met from Smithsonian, and the forest, or the canyon people, were very, very skeptical. They didn't have any laws to keep us out.
Yeah.
And they tried to make it a lot younger than what it was. They try to make you feel, you know, if you get the old ones, you're an archaeologist. If you get the young ones, you're a ghoul, you know. But there was one fellow that was working for him, a man named Hazel, and he was working for the Parks Department up there, and he was a lot of help. And he put me in contact with some people in Charleston, West Virginia. These were legal drug people. They were into drug businesses.
Yeah.
They had drug stores and this, and they bought a lot of the artifacts, and that kind of helped finance our mining of the guano.
Of course, the laws were different in those days.
Oh, unbelievable. You do this now, they'd put you under a jail.
Let me ask you a question, Joe. I've heard that the entrance to this place is about 1,400 feet from the surface up above, and it's still about 2,000 feet down further to the bottom of the canyon.
It's way up. It's not a place for somebody squeamish with height.
So when was the last time that was at water level?
I don't know. I'm not.
Pre-ice
I think they might have had another way in too. One of the things that they didn't mention in this article here was a real mystery to everybody. Even Goldwater, the senator, was real interested in some of these things, and he tried to get information for me a time or two. And there was an archaeologist. He was the head of the Historical Society in Phoenix. His name was Bert Fireman, and he was very interested in this. He was working at this, and these things kind of hit a dead end. Even Carl Hayden and Senator Goldwater. Goldwater was very interested in the aspect, particularly the Egyptian connection. And this was, but one of the artifacts I found in there, I took out, was it almost sunk the boat. Was a huge marble plaque on the wall, and there was shafts that came through. And when the sun would hit certain places, these marble plaques would light up. One of these was big enough I made a table out of it and took it home, and it was third dimensional depth. It was really like and it was beautiful. And it showed the construction of a pyramid, but they were moving the rocks with rollers. Not rollers, but the rollers went all over the ball, over the whole ball. And they was carved right in that. And in the corner of one of the deals, there was a slot cut out like the sun, but it went clean through the deal, and it set on a shaft. There was a light that came through there from the sun. I only saw the sun go through that one time. I took these plaques off and took them out. We sold some of them, and some of the things survived for a while, but they was worth money. They didn't pay any real money for them, but they was, some of them got to some major companies, some auction houses. And there was a lot of other people. I run into a lot of people who were really making money on pottery and stuff like in those days. But Mr. Price and Mr. Cooper, who owned this drug firm in Charleston, West Virginia, bought a lot of this stuff.
Amazing.
In particular, anything that was pornographic-like. If it had naked Navy. Incidentally, none of the mummies, or they call them there, was female. They were all males.
Is that why they thought it was, I'm sorry, Nick, is that why they thought it was a barracks? Go ahead, Nick, I'm sorry.
I have no, one of the things that messed me, and nobody ever understood, and I never found out about it either, was there was a shaft that went up thousands of feet, and there was a square copper bar that went up that, clean up to the top of the canyon, way up to the top of the canyon.
You mean the bar was thousands of feet
all the way
long?
right through it, but the bar went down into a cast iron pit. And around this, there was a lot of white powder. It was real light, like dust.
It almost sounds like an electrical device.
It was. One time I was in there, and there was a storm over the canyon, and it hit there, and it affected my ears. I went to Dr. Kitt, and he put some oils in my ears and a bunch of other stuff, but I couldn't hear for quite a while. There was a crack that went through there, and it lit up. I mean, the whole place lit up. So I kind of think it was something to do with the light. Now, there was artifacts in this place there that was metal that had been plated. So they were plating metal. These people were plating. They had cast iron. They were plating. There was a lot of copper implements and all this other stuff. So they were into metallurgy and a big deal. I never could get anybody to tell me. I took it to old man Jacobs and tried to ask, say, what this white powder was. And later I was contacted by one farmer over in Yuma, Hudson, and a guy named Champion, and they were playing with this, and they were trying to take gold into a white metal. But I later discovered that you could take a sonic grinder with sound, a resonance generator, and break things down. And if you take a bucket of 5-gallon quartz crystals and you put them in a sonic ceramic grinder, and the brown breaks them down, and you catch all the moisture, catch all the dust and everything else, and that 5 pounds will weigh just ounces.
Wow.
Just ounces.
Hold on one second.
If I can back engineer it, maybe we've always thought about if it could get the other way, to take this monoatomic gold and the other stuff the other way, back engineer it. That's been a dream.
Nick,
I've got a lot of big people interested in that.
Do you have something there?
Yes, you'd mentioned earlier the mummies, and you'd said you felt that they were larger.
They were much bigger. I don't think there was any of them that was there that was under 6 foot. They were big people.
So, but you'd think they were possibly giants, or just sort of
Not
large?
giants, but they were well fed. I mean,
Did they have facial features?
The skin is old, of course, and it was dried. But it appeared to be black, but anything would be black, I think, at that time period.
Did they have an oriental? They were probably too dried up to tell, huh?
It had more of a negroid picture appearance. Now, I had a bunch of pictures, and it's surprising how you would go to these people at the universities at Tempe, and I mean at ASU and the university here in town and other places, and particularly Smithsonian, how you pass them around a group of pictures, and they'd never all come back. They never all come back. I mean, and everybody wanted to know about it, but when you come down to trying to get information on it, even a senator couldn't get information. There was just a stone wall. And later, they got so they were trying to keep us out. It's me shaking.
Put the cable under your foot there, Joe.
Yep.
But it was interesting. I made a little money out of it. I really butchered a lot of it. I had no training in really dating anything. I had no training at all. To me, it was money. It was worth something.
Lift up your foot.
And I went into it. I took quite a few people in there, a lot of people. Later, there was a man from Smithsonian was working at Kitts Peak out here for a while, and working at the one at Amato, and he got a little interested in this. And next thing you know, they had him for some kind of accounting mistake, and they put him in prison.
Okay.
So it got dangerous.
Hold on to that thought for a few seconds, Joe. Could we go to the next segment, so the audience will have a chance to hear this article in its entirety?
Okay.
We'll get back to it.
This is Mr. Kincaid's report. Mr. Kincaid was the first white man born in Idaho and has been an explorer and hunter all his life. 30 years having been in the service of the Smithsonian. He sounds fabulous, almost grotesque. First, I would impress that the cavern is nearly inaccessible. The entrance is 1,486 feet down the sheer canyon wall. It is located on government land, and no visitor will be allowed there under penalty of trespass. The scientists wish to work unmolested without fear of hunters. A trip there would be fruitless, and the visitor would be sent on his way. The story of how I found the cavern has been related, but in a paragraph, I was journeying down the Colorado River in a boat, alone, looking for mineral. Some 42 miles up the river from the El Tovar Crystal Canyon, I saw on the east wall stains in the sedimentary formation about 2,000 feet above the riverbed. There was no trail to this point, but I finally reached it with great difficulty. Above a shelf which hid it from the view of the river was the mouth of the cave. There are steps leading from the entrance some 30 yards to what was, at the time, the cavern was uninhabited, and the level of the river. When I saw the chisel marks on the wall inside the entrance, I became interested, securing my gun, and went in. During that trip, I went back several hundred feet along the main passage till I came to the crypt in which I discovered the mummies. One of these I stood up and photographed by flashlight. I gathered a number of relics which I carried down to the Colorado, to Yuma, from whence I shipped them to Washington with details of the discovery. Following this, the explorations were undertaken. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you, are you aware, now you've had a lot of contacts with professors and people at Smithsonian. Did they ever follow up and do a major explorational study of this?
Yes and no. they did follow, but they won't tell you about it. And there was a lot of people came into it, and finally it was blown shut to keep people out of it. Now I wasn't. I was really the soiler. They tried everything in the world to get me out of the area, and at that time there was no laws I was breaking, and that was it. But it attracted real people. There was one man that was very interested in this, was Dr. Kendall. Dr. Kendall was from Scotland, Edinburgh. He was an Edinburgh professor. He was over looking for metal, and he was he wrote a book. One book he wrote with Dr. Schramm at the University of Colorado, and they were looking for colloidal and ionic gold. They were looking for gold that they couldn't even see, but they was trying to recover it. Evidently, he was pretty good at it. He went down to Artemisa in Mexico before I met him, and he found a pretty good-sized deposit of gold. And he got caught at the border at Nogales with about a little more than a ton of gold. And they arrested him, put him in prison on the camp up here on Mount Lemmon, and I got later a federal judge, Judge Fry, through the firm of Cusick, Watson and Fry, and they leased him to me for 5 years and 20 quarters, and he quit work with me at the minute he got his Social Security with the 20 quarters. But he worked with me. I gave him a new Jeep, and his one of the things on this. But I wasted him. I used him to plant trees, and I mean, it was unbelievable. I just didn't have the knowledge of what he was doing. But he was into metallurgy in a way, and he was trying to back engineer. And he wrote one article, he gave me a copy of it. It was in Cornet magazine in 1938. I'll get a copy of that article for you, because he was saying that this white powder could extend life. And he got the Mormon church involved in it. They made him a bishop, and he became a Mormon the last part of his life. And the Mormon church was still trying to get into the area up there. And the people who was in it were very high-level Mormons. I went to Salt Lake City one time, and they showed me their treasures, the big bulls and all this other stuff. And a man named Kay, which I later found out was one of the high-level officials, sat down like we're talking here, and he transcribed everything I said. And Kendall had done a lot of work on that.
No, Joe. When you went into this place, you went through this passageway, and it opened up into other areas. What did the walls? Do you remember how the walls looked in there?
The walls were smooth. They weren't like a pick mark. There wasn't anything like that.
Yeah.
It makes you feel like the place was something like a ceremonial place, because it had an eerie feeling. There's something about it that you don't know what's there, and you're a little bit spooked. And I took a couple of other younger kids up with me a time or two to stay with me, because if I got hurt or something, the people wouldn't even know. Alan kept a pretty good track. I mean, he made some maps, and Alan was trying to make sure that I didn't get lost somewhere. And we finally got to carbide lights. See, the first time we found it, we didn't have any lights. And we got to carbide lights, and they did pretty good with the miner's light. But we couldn't do it justice. We did set a generator out there one time, and the wind shifted, and the fumes came back into the building, but there was no place to set the generator other than the entrance itself. So
there was a mining crew that all 5 of them died down in Mexico because they had a generator in the mouth of the mine, and the wind sucked the fumes in and killed them all.
Well, we got a little sick at that time in there. So it was hard to get anybody to go in with you. It was very hard to first of all, people thought she was crazy. Now, Bill Hazel worked for the Parks Department. We became lifelong friends, but Hazel recovered some of the powdered gold and this other stuff and was playing with mercury. And the last part of his life, he had a good government pension, thank God. Otherwise, he would have starved to death because he went stark crazy. He was threatening people, and he'd go off with a hammer, and he was paranoid, and I couldn't even have a gun in the car with him. He discharged a gun one time, blew the back of the window out of the car. But his mercury has a...
Not your ideal next-door neighbor.
It's not. But Bill, I took care of him the last part of his life. His mother was always grateful for that, but Bill did go completely crazy. Now, Bill threatened senators and congressmen and all this other stuff, even presidents, I think, but they'd never do anything with him. He had a good service record, and they knew that he was a Mad Hatter.
Okay. How about the artifacts themselves? Can you describe some of them, Joe?
Well, the big ones that I almost sunk the little rubber raft with was these marble ones. Now, getting those down with blocks and tackle and pulleys and all this stuff was quite a job. One of them I made into a table that sat in our house for years and years. And when people would offer money on these things, I was always in need of money. I was always broke, and had another kid coming and had a new project. And I never really, the most part of my life, I never worked for anybody else. And it was just hard to make a living. Marilyn is really the fault. She was supposed to have been here today, but she just let me go, and she always figured I'd come back. But
it's a miracle you did.
Sometimes there were some times that I didn't tell you. Vern Hamill wanted to get into this. Hamill's kind of a hustler and a treasure. Well, Vern wanted in this real bad, and I figured if there's going to be anything left after Vern, so I never took Vern with me. I went with Vern on big ships and on diving. We both were good diving partners, but I never really trusted Vern very much. If you got in trouble down underwater, Vern will let you die. 2 or 3 of the people went out, but Vern didn't come back. I mean, Vern just...
Vern was a Vern.
Vern was a Vern. That's a good definition.
Okay.
He's still alive.
Is he?
Yeah.
No.
Let's keep up with this so the audience can get up to speed on this article. The next segment is what we've just been talking about, the passages. I'll read that one.
But let me tell you about Vern. This is just get you. This will get you.
Okay.
Joseph Bonanno financed Vern on a treasure hunt one time with his 2 boys, Bonanno. And Vern almost got killed on this one. They were going to salvage copper from an abandoned deal down in Panama. They bought a big LSD deal, and they had a winch on it, and they went down and they found the copper. And they said, Vern is a damn good diver. His Navy trained him real well. But anyway, they started pulling this up, and they almost sunk the LSD with copper that was pulling off the bottom of the ocean down there. They found out the cable was alive. The Navy moved in. It was the master communications between Panama and San Diego. And they arrested Vern, Bonanno's kids, and they had him in jail. And I had to sell Vern's house, his mine, a whole bunch of other stuff to get him out of jail. And they bribed their way out, and he got out. Vern went into hiding for about 15, 20 years. He thought Bonanno was going to kill him. Bonanno thought it was a good experience for the kids and laughed about it. I never told Vern that, but Vern really breathed a sigh of relief just a few months ago when Bonanno died.
All right, let's get back on target here.
I'm bad if I get you off track.
The passages, talks about the passages in this article next. It says the main passageway is about 12 feet wide, narrowing to 9 feet toward the farther end. About 57 feet from the entrance, the first side passage branch off to the right and left, along which on both sides are a number of rooms about the size of ordinary living rooms of today, though some 30 or 40 feet square. These are entered by oval-shaped doors and ventilated by round air spaces through the walls into the passages. The walls are about 3 feet 6 inches in thickness. The passages are chiseled or hewn as straight as could be laid out by an engineer. The ceilings of many of the rooms converge to the center. The side passages near the entrance run a sharp angle from the main hall, but toward the rear they gradually reach a right angle in direction. Does that hold true with what
I talked to a lot of architects about it. Art Brown. I talked to even Frank Lloyd Wright about this. The things that's in there were round and square. So there was a square and compass concept to it, and they were well done. They were polished, and it's just something. Of course, we didn't have the kind of light we really needed in there. These carbide lights were never that good, and that one bad experience with the trying to put electric lights in it was real bad.
Yeah.
There was no place to put the stuff. There was no ledges. There was no entrance to it, and the way we got in and out, I went on the top and anchored it real heavy with some borings. I took a drill up there, a portable drill, and drilled in and anchored it down. And I got a bunch of stuff out of Davis Monthan. They were shipping stuff, and it went into salvage. And they were using these chains to scale stuff in Europe. And they had a bunch of them. They was rusty. And I put a bunch of these chains in there. I never did take all the chains out. And I went the chain from the top to the bottom, and that. And finally, I got some holes that I drilled in the sidewall, and that's the job to drill them in, and anchored the chain so that the chains wouldn't move out and in on it, because you could really mess your fingers up, and it was scary. It was scary.
I'll bet it was.
So you went into the same entrance that Mr. Kincaid went into, right?
I don't think so, because I went in a virgin entrance. Now, I never really went through all the thing. I spent a lot of time up there. And I had to split time between the bat manure and this here. But the bat manure was making more money than selling the artifacts out of there.
Amazing.
But the artifacts were not normal Indian artifacts. There was pots out of copper, pots out of iron, there was pots out of other metals, and there was mergers of metals. And there was quite a little bit of gold in there, not big but gold. I mean, the Internal Revenue still be looking for that, but there was small artifacts of gold. And a lot of things were pornographic. There was men and women doing acts of compromising anyway.
Okay. And Nick, how about this next section here, the shrine?
The shrine. Over 100 feet from the entrance is the cross hall, several hundred feet long, in which are found the idol or image of the people's god, sitting cross-legged with a lotus flower or lily in each hand. The cast of the face is oriental, and the carving shows a skillful hand, and the entire is remarkably well preserved, as is everything in this cavern. The idol most resembles Buddha, though the scientists are not certain as to what religious worship it represents. Taking into consideration everything found thus far, it is possible that this worship most resembles the ancient people of Tibet. Surrounding this idol are smaller images, some very beautiful in form, others crooked-necked and distorted shapes, symbolic probably of good and evil. There are two large cactus with protruding arms, one on each side of the dais on which the god squats. All this is carved out of hard rock resembling marble. In the opposite corner of this cross hall were found tools of all descriptions made of copper. These people undoubtedly knew the lost art of hardening this metal, which has been sought by chemists for centuries without result. On a bench running around the workroom was some charcoal and other material probably used in the process. There is also slag and stuff similar to Mate, showing that these ancients smelted ores, but so far no trace of where or how this was done has been discovered, nor to the origin of the ore. Among the other finds are vases and urns and cups of copper and gold, made very artistic in design. The pottery work includes enameled ware and glazed vessels. Another passageway leads to granaries such as found in Oriental temples. They contain seeds of various kinds. One very large storehouse has not yet been entered, as it is 12 feet high and can be reached only from above. Two copper hooks extend on the edge, which indicates that some sort of ladder was attached. These granaries are rounded, as the materials of which they are constructed, I think, is a very hard cement. A gray metal is also found in this cavern, which puzzles the scientists, for its identity has not been established. It resembles platinum. Strewn promiscuously over the floor everywhere are what people call cat's eyes, a yellow stone of no great value. Each one is engraved with the head of the Malay type.
Very good, Nick.
There was a citron, a lot of yellow stones in there. There was yellow quartz like. The gray metal could not be identified. The University of Arizona and the Goldwater people up in Phoenix that's into aggregate and stuff like that, they couldn't identify it. And old man Jacobs, the old man, his young son's still in the assaying business, he could never give me a good reading on it, what it was. It wasn't what we normally understand. It wasn't, they wouldn't call it platinum. There was a man named Peters that lived up at Cactus Junction. It was a kind of a self-taught metallurgist. He said it was platinum, but I couldn't get confirmation from anybody else it was platinum. And,
So the ancients,
but it was not. It was a noble metal. It would not rust. Now there was stuff in there that would rust, and what got me was they were actually they were coating things. They were plating gold. So a lot of the stuff that was gold was not really gold. They were plating copper and they were plating silver.
Fascinating. Okay, so
he didn't mention there was some huge canisters that they had evidently had water in. How they got the water there, I haven't figured out, because it had to come from way down. If it was bucketed up, and the size of these canisters that held this water would have been huge. And another thing, there wasn't any vents big enough to take the smoke off of the smelters there. There was no way. I don't know how how did they stay alive when they were doing metallurgy there?
Maybe they didn't. Well, in the beginning of this article, it mentioned there was a continuous draft through the whole place, so that there had to be a second opening. Maybe you went in through that second opening.
I never went through the whole thing. I spent a couple of years up there with on and off, but I was up there for another purpose.
Yeah.
We were still looking for uranium, and we never got enough uranium out of there to do much of anything. But
yeah,
it was an experience.
You know,
but artifacts, I earned a lot of real good work.
Yeah. You know, the Smithsonian denies any knowledge of this Mr. Kincaid, but I would also like to mention that the Smithsonian, from what I understand, has erased all information about Nikola Tesla. So as far as they're concerned, he doesn't exist either.
Well,
you know, they play this game.
Charlie Tugas was working for the Smithsonian. He got a little interested in this, and before it was over, they arrested him for taking surplus and giving it to the federal government. Without him, they would have never built that big observatory between here and Nogales. He built that whole thing down there, and what they give him for it, they put him in jail. But I think maybe his nosing around on this other might have been probably part of his problem. Now, he spent 18 months in a jail. It was a country club jail down there with the rest of the president's people.
Okay, we've got to keep moving on here so the audience will have a chance to hear this article in its entirety. The next segment is, gee, I get the short ones, you get the long ones.
I know.
I'm sorry. About the hieroglyphs. It says, excuse me, on all of the urns or the walls over doorways in tablets of stone which were found by the image are the mysterious hieroglyphs, the key to which the Smithsonian Institute hopes to yet discover. The engraving on the tablets probably has something to do with the religion of the people. Similar hieroglyphs have been found in southern Arizona. Among the pictorial writings, only 2 animals are found. One is of a prehistoric type. Have you seen any of that?
Yes. One of the men that's still alive and would make an excellent interview if you. He's an older man, He lives at Ajo, Arizona, and his name is John Allen. He's no relation to to the Glenn that was with me, but they had the same name. John Allen found. John Allen, you have to tell a little bit about him in a way. He was a school teacher. He was in a bad car wreck, and he couldn't get up the steps of the school. So they give him the dog catcher's job. Now, up until that time, the deputies used to go out and shoot the dogs. That was the system of getting rid of the dogs. Well, Allen, when he got into the position down there, he was a humane person, and he got all these wonder drugs for dogs and the myosins and that. But in the process, the Indians found out they could get better treatment from that dog veterinarian down there, that self-taught veterinarian, than they could at the Indian services. So they had diabetes, and he was getting insulin for them and all this other stuff. And in the process, they showed him things that they would never show another white man. Now, Allen actually got into some of these things, and one of the things he found was a pyramid just south of Ajo, Arizona. And
when was this, Joe?
This was back about 57, 58, and 59 in there. And when he found this pyramid, he pried it open, and he found an Egyptian-type mummy in there, black with gold artifacts and Egyptian-type cloth.
How large was the pyramid?
Pretty good size. It was a good, almost a story high or so, about, I'd say a good 12, 14 foot high. And it was polished, well put together. He tucked the whole in. Well, he told the government about it and they was helicopters, Huey-type stuff, come in and got this stuff and picked this all up and moved it all out. And I asked 100 people on this, and Goldwater one time did tell me he thought that it went to the Lewis and Clark Museum in Washington. But they wouldn't even give him answers. I later found out a lot of the Indians were very upset with this. Now, the Indians get real upset. The Kinnapaw man's a perfect example of that.
Rightfully so. Sure.
They don't want to be any Egyptians over here before them. And you talk about these people being, what I said, I didn't get the impression that this was Oriental in nature. The things I saw in there were more of what an Egyptian in nature. I did talk to some Egyptologists and got into that a little bit.
Okay, we're getting short on time. How about the next section is titled The Crypt?
The Crypt? Oh, that sounds scary.
Tales of the Crypt.
The tomb or crypt in which the mummies were found is one of the largest chambers the walls slanting back at an angle of about 35 degrees. On these are tiers of mummies, each one occupying a separate hewn shelf. At the head of each is a small bench, on which is found copper cups and pieces of broken swords. Some of the mummies are covered in clay, and all are wrapped in a bark fabric. The urns or cups on the lower tiers are crude, while as the higher shelves are reached, the urns are finer in design, showing a later stage of civilization. It is worthy of note that all of the mummies examined so far have proved to be male, no children or females being buried here. This leads to the belief that this exterior section was the warriors' barracks. Among the discoveries, no bones of animals have been found, no skins, no clothing, no bedding. Many of the rooms are bare, but for water vessels. One room, about 40 by 700 feet, was probably the main dining hall, for cooking utensils are found here. What these people lived on is a problem, though it is presumed that they came south in the winter and farmed in the valleys, going back north in the summer. Upwards of 50,000 people could have lived in the caverns comfortably. One theory is that the present Indian tribes found in Arizona are descendants of the serfs or slaves of the people which inhabited the cave. Undoubtedly, a good many thousands of years before the Christian era, a people lived here which reached a high stage of civilization. The chronology of human history is full of gaps. Professor Jordan is much enthused over the discoveries and believes that the find will prove of incalculable value in archaeological work. One thing I have not spoken of may be of interest. There is one chamber of the passageway to which is not ventilated, and when we approached it, a deadly, snaky smell struck us. Our lights would not penetrate the gloom, and until stronger ones are available, we will not know what the chamber contains. Some say snakes, but others boo-hoo this idea and think it may contain a deadly gas or chemicals used by the ancients. No sounds are heard, but it smells snaky just the same. The whole underground installation gives one of shaky nerves the creeps. The gloom is like a weight on one's shoulder, and our flashlights and candles only make the darkness blacker. Imagination can reveal in conjectures and ungodly daydreams back through the ages that have eclipsed or elapsed till the mind reels dizzily in space.
Okay, Joe?
He's right on some of the things there, but the angles was a lot steeper than that. The angles were on more than 50, 52 degree angles on the sides of that, because I did check the angles on this because I thought it had something bearing something up above. But anyway, I looked in all of these things. I found some unbelievable artifact. One was an eye that was in a ring that had a nail on it, and my wife's got that. Mm-hmm. And I've got one with a funeral boat that has solid gold in the top on it with a little lapis on the sides. And the lapis was knocked out of this, and I had a jeweler replace it with some more pieces of lapis. It was all there, but it's a big man's ring.
Fascinating.
And it looks like, if you put it this way, it looks like a funeral boat. But it has two ankas on the side. There was ankas in the place. They're not crosses, but they were the egg-top shape on the top and that. Yeah. And some of them had two legs on the bottom instead of one, almost looking like a stick man.
We've got to jump right to the next segment, not to get this in time here, Joe. The last segment is an Indian legend. In connection with this story, it is notable that among the Hopi Indians, the tradition is told that their ancestors once lived in an underworld in the giant canyon till dissension arose between the good and the bad, the people of the one heart and the people of two hearts. Makito, I believe that's pronounced correctly, who was their chief counsel, counseled them to leave the underworld, but there was no way out. The chief then caused a tree to grow and a piece of the roof of the underworld, and then the people of one heart climbed out. They tarried by Pescavari, I believe, or the Red River, in other words, in English, which is the Colorado, and grew grain and corn. They set out a message of the temple of the sun, asking the blessings of peace and goodwill and rain for the people of one heart. The messenger never returned, but today at the Hopi villages at sundown can be seen the old man of the tribe out of the housetops gazing towards the sun, looking for the messenger. When he returns, their lands and their ancient dwelling place will be restored to them. This is the tradition among the engravings in the cave, is seen in the image of the heart over the spot where it is located. The legend was learned by W.E. Rollins, the artist, during a year spent with the Hopi Indians. There are two theories of the origin of the Egyptians. One is that they came from Asia, another that the racial cradle was in the Upper Nile region. Herring, an Egyptologist, believed that the Indian origin of the Egyptians, the discoveries in the Grand Canyon, may throw further light on the human evolution in prehistoric ages. Fascinating. That's it, folks.
There was carvings of snakes on certain places. And one of the things that was kind of unusual, they could bind things together. They could take lapis and put it together with almost like a plastic. And it had like a rosin or amber, and what it did, it made a synthetic lapis. But they were a higher level of civilization. I really believe that. The thing that really bothers me, and Kendall really spent a lot of time on the white powder, and that the Mormon Church was most interested in the white powder.
Yeah, Joe, go ahead, Nick. Before
I just want to ask one. What do you estimate the age of this being? Any idea?
I never found anything that I could carve and date it. I took some pieces of wood that was there that I found in the area to the tree ring people at the University of Arizona, and all they wanted was money. They weren't interested in doing any research on it. And now Goldwater really tried to get something done with it. He had a real interest in Indians, and he had a real... Now the Hopis, Goldwater had talked to some of them, and these people have always treated me with real respect. The elders, the old ones. The old ones would talk about this and talk about that, and they shared other things with you that actually would get you off on another thing too. I got a bunch of dinosaur tracks one time on a Hopi reservation. Sold them.
Okay, hold on, Joe. We're running out of time. I just want to tell everybody, if they want to read this article for themselves, jump on the internet, type in the title of the article, Explorations in the Grand Canyon, and you might type in April 5th, 1909 as well, and you can read this for yourself. This is what we were reading to you tonight and what Joe is relating to you from his own experience there. We've got a few announcements.
You can take that date and go to the state capitol and go into the deal, and you can get a copy of the original article.
Okay. Let me go through these announcements, whatever time we got left over. We'll.
Sure.
Okay. Future shows coming up on the cutting edge. Jeff Wills will be our next guest. He has a fabulous UFO footage, and he has his own website, UFOs Over Phoenix. Stephen Mailer will be here talking about pre-Egyptian history. Robert Ghostwolf will be here talking about Hollow Earth. Dr. Steve Canada will be here talking about crop circles and their ancient connections. Dr. Louis Torrey and Druffel. Bob Dean will be here in July. And if anybody has any UFO photos, we cannot send them back to you. We're just too busy. But if you want to email them to us or snail mail them to us, get in touch with us through the screen at the end of the show, and we'd be happy to put them up for you. I need to make one correction. About a year ago, we did a show with Professor James McCaney, and through my own volition, my own mistake, I had referred to him as Dr. McCaney a few times on the show. He is really a wonderful man, Professor McCaney. I apologize for that if anybody was misled as to his credentials. Okay, there's a MUFON meeting here in Tucson, April 9th, 1 to 4:30 p.m. Douglas Lombardi from the University of Arizona is going to be lecturing on the planet Mars. That's it. Now we can get back to it.
You might mention the fact that last
2 minutes.
Dr. Schwartz was over at the MUFON meeting. There wasn't room for anybody to go in the room. They had to turn people away. So the people better get there early. Yeah.
What about this room that we just read about that had that smell of snakes, that death aroma, I guess you could call it?
I think it was possibly feces, because it stunk really bad. And I think that, and I told you that I took some of the dried stuff outside, and when it got into moisture or water, it still stunk after all these years.
Thousands of years.
And after that, and that was part. I really believe that this predated our metallurgy. I believe it was much, much older. Yeah. It's too bad that we couldn't get a carbon dating on some of the stuff that was there. But they were more interested in other things.
But it has been, the entrance has been covered up now.
It's been blown, the whole wall's blown down.
Oh, is that right, huh? Do you think there might be another entrance somewhere else?
I'm almost certain there was. Like he was saying, there was cross ventilation in the area. and it just couldn't come from that one shaft where the copper was.
Big question, the $64 question. Could you find it today, right now, if you wanted to?
I think so. I'm 75 years old, and that's a hell of a climb.
You're probably going to be getting a lot of phone calls.
I have. A lot of people have come to me. You wouldn't believe the people from all over the world. There's people from Germany. There's been people from China. There's been people from all over come on this.
But you think the place has been cleaned out by now?
I don't know. I know they sure as hell cleaned the one out that Alan found over there. They moved it out with helicopters.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why this is so secretive. Why do we have to have a government that's so secretive? What's this got to do with?
Well, they're paranoid and fearful.
Well,
they're trying to sell the fear to us too.
Yeah,
there might be a company that wants a lid kept on this because of who has these artifacts.
I want to give you that article that Dr. Kendall did in 19...
Oh, wait a minute. Are we going out, Judge? 10 seconds. 10 seconds. Okay. Folks, I'm sorry.
I'll get you a copy.
We never did get a chance to talk about water. I apologize. We'll have to do it on another show. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. This goes deeper and deeper and deeper. We've only scratched the surface tonight, folks. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.
A true rabbit hole.